Bunting, MBE,
I try not to use that word fail.
is a highly experienced expedition leader and high-altitude mountaineer. His career is full of remarkable achievements, leading teams on expeditions in some of the world's toughest environments, including heading a team of elite climbers on the rarely attempted west ridge of Mount Everest. Dave's insights will make you ready to tackle anything. Thank you very much and welcome to today's episode. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's honestly a pleasure. So I just wanted to start with, as someone who's never climbed a mountain, can you tell me what was the reason that you became a mountaineer? Why did you get into that? How did you get into that?
Well, I think, to be honest, the reason I got into it is fairly simple in a way that I just love the outdoors. Grew up in the countryside, and so life was quite simple and just really appreciated nature and the outdoors, scenery and fresh air, exercise, that sort of stuff. And so I think that's probably why I got into it in the first place.
Which I love nature. I'm always out in the woods and things like that, as a lot of people are. But like that choice of saying, do you know what, that mountain, I'm going to go for that. Like, what was the sort of thought behind it? What was the first mountain that you climbed? Let's start there.
The first proper mountain I climbed was in North Wales, very near to Snowdon. And I just remember, I was part of a group. I was actually, when I first joined the army, as part of a group, and we went off up this mountain and we came in the mist. And I remember opening this can of Coke on the summit, and it was freezing cold. And I thought, this is, quite a different, scary environment, but I loved it.
Yeah.
So it was at Mulsey Abbot in North Wales was my first mountain.
And when you get to the top of a mountain, I mean, I know that you've climbed many mountains. What is it that you think that you get from that? Like you say, you've sat at the top and, what is it that you get for your soul almost? Like, what do you get for the inside? Is there something like an experience or a feeling when you've got to the top of a mountain?
I mean, it is an amazing feeling. I was just thinking to myself there that lots of mountains I've climbed with other people.
Okay.
There's not many mountains I've climbed where I was all on my own, but so when you're with other people, the feeling of just being with that other person and enjoyment of the conversation and just what goes around looking at scenery and so on. But when I have climbed mountains on my own, it's sort of crazy. It's a bit hard to describe, but that real just amazing feeling.
Is it the view as well?
For me, it is massively.
Yeah.
Although I have done a fair amount in the clouds when you're learning and so on, you go out doing navigating in bad weather and so on. Now I don't like to go out that much unless you get the views. But when you get the views, I just love it. Especially in the bigger mountains or when there's snow in the Alps, someplace like that. Some of the scenery is just incredible.
I remember watching something a while ago and it was like an ancient wisdom, like a Chinese proverb or something. And I have tried to find it again, actually, because of obviously having a conversation with yourself. And it is about a mountain. And it said something along the lines of being able to get like picked up and dropped at the top. Like the difference between being, like obviously yourself, you would know if you were dropped on the top of a mountain by a helicopter, and then the difference from that to actually climbing that mountain, there must be something completely different in, like, is it the achievement? Is it like,
I
can
think,
you explain the feeling?
I think I've always enjoyed doing physical things. I suppose you get some reward from, you've put the effort in to get there. And I have been dropped off on top of a mountain by a helicopter. So
we've got the perfect person to ask this.
And don't get me wrong, that was great fun. But you don't feel like you deserve it so much because, you haven't climbed up there. But I think if you're doing it with other people as well, there's that shared hardship of getting up there together that's massively rewarding.
And it's almost like an analogy for life, that, isn't it, really? It's like, when you face those challenges and you face like difficulty, like once you get through it, you have like a personal growth.
Yeah.
And obviously it's really difficult to be in the challenges and the hardships. And I'm sure loads of people feel like that. But then it's like you're climbing a mountain of life almost, aren't you? You know what I mean? And like, I don't know. It's just that idea of being able to.
I do love the journey.
Yeah.
Is it, like I've been on some, when you go to the Himalayas, for example, it's a really tough environment. And quite a lot of times when I've been out there, we haven't got to tops of mountains because there's so many things against you.
Yeah.
But some of those where we haven't got to tops of mountains, I've just loved the journey, love being with the team, love the experience we've had, love the growth we've had, love the fun we've had. It's massively about the journey for me, for sure. And I remember having dinner with Chris Bonington, who's one of Britain's greatest mountaineers.
Yeah.
And he said the same. It's some of the expeditions he's been on where he didn't get to the top. He's just had an amazing experience. So it's all about the journey.
When you get to the top of the mountain, this is just sort of a side question, but how much of a peak is it? How much of a point does it come to? Is there always that flat area where you can take a moment to look, or is there a fear to, do you know what I mean?
It can be unbelievably different on every peak. Some peaks can be very rounded and you can all stand on there together without any fear whatsoever. But there are some peaks where you might, need to be belayed by a rope to get onto the edge of it and it be a proper pinnacle.
Yeah.
Or a proper, snow cornice where it's overhanging snow and quite dangerous at the summit. So it can be unbelievably different.
And do you have a preference? Is there a certain mountain, or is there even a certain, the peak that you've enjoyed the most in terms of the view or the feeling that you've got from it? What's been the most moving for you to
I
climb?
think probably the most moving. I mean, you're making me think now. Over lots of different peaks I've been able to climb in the Alps and other different places. But in terms of feeling, it's probably most driven by the people that I'm with.
Yeah.
And in 2018, I was lucky enough to lead an expedition to the Himalayas with veterans and serving soldiers who had all had challenges during their careers. All sorts of different things, but we stood on a peak 100 years after the end of the First World War. We stood on Remembrance Day.
Wow.
And the sort of emotion around that, I mean, the scene was amazing. You see Everest and 5 of the other 8,000 metre peaks, but to be there with that group of people who were novice mountaineers as well, just whole feeling around what they'd gone through to get there was special. And some of them were also, because it was Remembrance Day, remembering friends they'd lost in war and so on. So it was an amazing feeling.
How did it change? Do you know if it changed them, that experience?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember at the end of that expedition, so that was about a year and a half of preparation. It was about a 1 month expedition.
Yeah.
And at the end of the expedition, I said to one of the guys, how was it for you? And this particular guy had been through some extremely serious stuff in his military career. Was suffering with, very serious PTSD, and he pretty well said the expedition had saved his life.
Wow.
And he was a very genuine guy, but just that whole experience of just being around like-minded people, feeling supported, also doing something really fun and challenging together was special.
I think that connection of human connection is so important, and
massively.
We're so disjointed. So to do these challenges, it must be it's so rewarding for yourself, but for each other, and just even just that connection, the connection together. It must be such a wonderful thing. You're so lucky to have that,
Well, the connection is, I'm probably biased, but the connection's unbeatable.
Yeah.
When you've gone through hardship and danger together, it's massive.
Because I saw on the obviously in 2006 the expedition that you you went on. Because am I right in thinking you didn't actually get to the top?
That's right.
Do you want to explain a little bit about?
So in 2006, I led an expedition to the West Ridge of Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And not many people have climbed the West Ridge. It's one of the hardest routes on Everest. In fact, only 2 people have climbed the route that we were on.
Wow.
2 Canadians, a man and a woman. The whole expedition was 3 months. We did 3 years of preparation before that. But we were 10 weeks on the mountain, and we were on the summit day. We were unable to continue because of the avalanche danger.
Goodness.
So the lead team turned back, and we didn't continue because the danger for people's lives was so extreme.
Because I know that looking at sort of the footage from that, I did see that you'd had someone were you working alongside a skier who did actually lose their life on the?
We weren't we sort of were
Yeah.
well. There was a couple of very extreme skiers that were going out there to ski the north face of Everest, which was right next to where we were. We'd never met them before. And they were only 2 people. They arrived at our base camp and we had all the infrastructure to support them. So they stayed with us. And then they went around to climb Everest from one of the standard routes and ski the north face. And sadly, Thomas fell to his death, leaving his friend on the north face alone. But so we hadn't known them very long. But they're amazing people. Huge lovers of life. Majorly adventurous, but obviously it's extremely sad what happened, and had a big impact on our team.
I was going to say, how did you get through that for yourself, and how did the morale of like the group change, and how did you get that back?
Well, I suppose because it was a forces expedition, there were people in the team that had experienced that type of thing before. So we probably had that little bit of an advantage that people had been in, around that sort of thing before, loss of life. But we ended up really all coming back to base camp, all being around each other for 2 or 3 days. Our base camp manager spoke to Thomas's family in Sweden. We had a little ceremony nearer to the mountain, and sort of a couple of calm days to reflect upon it. But we knew also that Thomas was a massive adventurer. He wouldn't have wanted us to be too low and give up and pack up. So we did continue with what we were doing.
It's like the meanings behind it all. You had the meaning of what he would have wanted, and just like you've gone through certain challenges like that, so it's given you a bit more strength. It's really interesting, isn't it, how we deal with things and what things then mean, and how then we'll move forward with certain situations. And it's great that you were able to continue on doing that.
We had I think the big thing with it, we had a fantastic team. Really awesome team, and the support of each other around that to help each other deal with it was absolutely key to it.
And in terms of like obviously throughout your career and all the mountains and all the highs and lows, there will have been, I'm assuming, quite a lot of very difficult and low points at certain points. How do you tackle that? How do you deal with that? Obviously, it depends on the situation, but it would be,
if the lows are fortunately, I've not been around directly lots of people being killed in the mountains. There's been a couple of incidents, and it is difficult. I remember being on one mountain in the Himalayas where a Sherpa was killed. And, each day when we were walking up the mountain, his body was brought down the mountain and put in a tent to wrap him up in a tent before he was recovered by a helicopter. And for a few days we had to walk past his body on the mountain, and it does make you reflect massively on what you're doing. But I think there's a lot of joy in the mountains as well, and I think those people like Thomas and the Sherpa that died, that they you think on what they would have wanted. They wouldn't have wanted you to pack up and go home. They loved it. They want us to love it. So,
Does that make you live life more?
Knowing that people...
Just that experience, seeing that, sort of witnessing it so closely.
Yeah, I think it makes you want to live life more when you see that it can be, that I think there's when you have that serious side of life, and that, the thing about climbing and mountaineering, obviously it's a deadly serious part of it, but there's a huge amount of humour in it as well, and a huge amount of fun and adventure and life experiences. And I know, for example, mountain rescue, who obviously are dealing, with very serious situations, they inject massive humour into what they do to survive it. So there's a very funny situation between seriousness and humour, very closely connected to help you enjoy it more and get through it.
Laughter is a great tool to have. So when it comes to sort of motivation, how do you motivate yourself? So obviously you're going through, all these different expeditions, and there's got to be a time where obviously you as a leader, it's just it interests me to understand sort of what would motivate you, on maybe a difficult day like that, or...
I think, when I reflect on that, a lot of the time, when I think back about experiences I've had, and I probably didn't think about it so much in the early days, but do now, is I tend to surround myself with good people. So you're not dealing with motivating yourself or staying upbeat on your own a lot. You've got great people around you, and then the impact of sort of motivating each other and keeping each other happy, and it's all part of a team effort, really. And
I guess you've got like a good, like having those people around you, they've all got that drive to do something quite wonderful and quite different. That adventure must be in them. Yeah.
And I think when I look back at the Everest West Ridge trip for me was an amazing point in my life. And when I look at that one, the people within that, the effort we went to select people for that was extensive, to get the right people, so that when you're out there in that environment, you are, you do anything for each other. Yeah. And in fact, just last week, so, I met up with 4 members of the trip in London.
Really?
For a meal. And, obviously 2006, quite a long time ago now. But the bond, when we meet each other, is like nothing else.
That's fabulous, isn't it? So, what do you think it takes to be a person like that, who wants adventure, who wants to like make the most of their life and go on these journeys?
I think it takes somebody who obviously has got maybe an adventurous spirit, but's open-minded to do things. And one of the things that sticks in my mind a lot with thing that's gone off in my life, when I joined the forces at 16 years old, my cousin was already on the RAF. Yeah. And he gave me one piece of advice: volunteer for everything, was his advice, which at the time, I thought, right, okay. But actually, there's something behind that. If you're putting yourself forward for things, and that's how I've volunteered for lots of things, and some of them, most of them have led to really great things, great adventures and great experiences. So putting yourself out there for things, I think, is really key.
I think that's the case even with like making mistakes and all of that. Like everything comes with experience. Like, sometimes fear gets in the way for people in ways that it kind of hinders life and reduces them to a smaller life by never stepping out. And like you've done all of those things, stepping out. That's such a great piece of advice, to just like grab every opportunity, not necessarily just in the army, but like in life. And then 100%. That helps like remove fear almost a little bit, and it gives you a more rich life, a fulfilled life, Yeah.
I mean, I've always loved travel. Yeah. And apparently my great auntie said, when I was really, really young, that I wanted to see the world. I don't know what age I was when I said that, but, I think, I was probably around a few people that had done something. Like my granddad had been in the war, and my uncle, my great uncle, they'd done, I suppose, a lot of travel. So it was maybe from them that I grew that sort of
got this idea,
desire to travel a little bit.
Do you think you've gained certain skills or life experience from the challenges that you've gone through in terms of the expeditions and being in the army? What have the challenges brought you?
I think they've certainly put me in a situation probably where, when things get, sometimes daily life situations can be quite stressful. But I find sometimes if I get in a really extremely stressful situation, I'm able to cope with that a bit better, probably because I can put myself back where I might have been in extremely difficult situations. So when you're faced with something very difficult, I'm able to work my way through it.
Can you try to give me an understanding of like what happens in you? Is it your ability to find a peace? Is it an ability to see a greater picture? Like, how do you think you cope better? What skill is it, do you think?
I think, one thing that really sticks in my mind is I got into climbing and mountaineering very young, but actually in my last year of 24 years in the military, I did a parachute jump. And I'd never done a parachute jump before. And I'm actually with some very young people in the forces doing this jump. So there's some peer pressure on me. But I remember when I was asked to jump out this plane at 5,000 feet, I remember almost going into a robotic state. of thinking back to when I might have been in an extreme climbing situation and just, switch into that sort of mode of dealing with it in a robotic manner of climbing out the plane and letting go of the plane to fall in a parachute. Yeah. I think, it felt really robotic. I remember
it's
that.
Almost like you're able to get in control of like the mind that says no. I don't know. I'm not sure, because obviously your mind would be normally saying, don't do it. Have you got an ability to push through the kind of internal dialogue?
I have, I think there's certain things when it comes to, danger like parachuting or climbing or whatever it be. I think I've got an ability to get that dialogue going on that can get me through it in that robotic manner.
Right, okay.
I find now, slightly different when you've got a family and children and so on, that dialogue's probably a bit longer. Yeah. Because you're not just thinking about putting yourself through that robotic thing or your climbing team members. You're thinking emotionally about family members and children. So you've got a lot more to think about. So
did that bring any more fear to your life?
Having a family, it certainly changed my perspective on things a bit. I mean, when I always thought to myself I was quite a sensible climber, and made fairly good decisions. When I reflect back now on some situations I've been in, I probably think actually I may not have been that sensible. But now, having children, I remember being on a mountain in South America about 10 years ago. And we're up there in the middle of the night, and the avalanche situation was quite bad. Yeah. And me and this other leader were looking at each other, and I had that moment of, what am I doing here? Why am I here? I've got young children, and why would I put myself through this? Just for a moment, a thought like that. So it definitely makes you think a little bit different. And I have been invited back to Everest a couple of times on the standard route since our trip. Yeah. But the standard route's very dangerous in terms of ice cliffs falling on you and things like that. Yeah. Completely out of your control. And I think why I'm not going to put myself in that situation now that I've got a family. Because
so do you not think you'll ever do it again?
No, I think what I'd like to do now is mountains with less objective danger. There's always obviously danger in mountains, but on certain mountains, Everest is famous for it. You wind up through what's called the Khumbu Icefall on the standard route, and these teetering ice cliffs above you can fall on you at any minute. So I don't want to do things like that. Yeah, I feel that's too dangerous. But doing other mountains where you haven't got that going on, I definitely.
Do you think you would have done it at another point though? Do you feel like you'd have thought, I'll go for that? Yeah. Is it the thrill of it? Is it the something that you feel from it once you get through it?
Yeah, I think it is a thrill of it. But I absolutely love. I am massively driven by being part of a team. Yeah, and when you're in that team and you're all doing something together, you're all driven by each other. The camaraderie is on another level. Yeah, the want to do something. You're driving each other. Yeah, and so. I think going to dangerous situations in a calculated manner, but that drive to want to do it when it's not just about you is greater.
It sounds like as well, when you've talked about sort of the expeditions, that the planning seems to be a massive part of it. Yeah. How do you plan for the unknown then? How do you do? I guess you tell me. How do you plan for the unknown?
The planning is huge. Like I gave you the example, going to Everest took 3 years of preparation and planning to do that, and obviously it wasn't just me doing it; it was a whole team around me doing it as well. But it's massively important. Like when we went to Everest, our climbing leader, a guy called John, was very, very experienced, and he was really keen on sort of ripping up the textbooks and and making sure we're going through things really in detail of what we're going to do and considering every scenario possible. And so we did. We not only planned things out in our own mind from our own experience. We spoke to people. Yeah. We looked at images of it. We did everything we could before we went into that environment. And also we had training trips to the Alps where we did some serious stuff in the Alps. Some of that stuff being technically beyond what you might do on Everest. So people, I think in the Alps, one of the training routes we sent people off on was about 13 hours on the go. So that when you go to Everest and you're doing big days, you're properly ready for it.
I guess like when you go through all that, that must give you some resilience.
Yeah. Well, it gives you confidence in your body can do the climbing, do the keeping going for 13 hours. But, I think with a lot of it, you tend to try and do stuff that's harder before you go so that when you actually go there, it's easier. You can't obviously always do that with the big peaks, but you can. What we tried to do for Everest was to try to box off as many things as we could before we went so that we were just dealing with the unknown. So we tried to get as fit as possible. We got the best equipment. We got the best training. We pulled in, a triathlon coach to help us with our fitness. We worked with the university on our fitness. We got one of the best mountain guides in the world to work with. We did all of that stuff to make ourselves so well prepared that we only had to deal with the unknown, really.
Today's episode was supported by the Queen's Hotel, a place I highly recommend to eat, drink and recharge, relax in comfort and design, build business and networks, to celebrate in style. The Queen's, time well spent. So what I was thinking about was obviously the preparation that it takes to climb the mountain or a mountain and everything that goes into it. It's like, how could you compare that then to normal life? Like, do you prep, and why don't people prepare for life as much as they prepare to climb a mountain? Do you know what I mean? It's like you've got into peak physical fitness, you've looked at all the ins and outs of everything, and it's like there's such a lesson in that for life, really.
Yeah,
do you see what I mean?
I think, obviously what mountain you're climbing depends on how much preparation you do. You climb some mountains and just pack your bag and go. But something like Everest, why I think Everest is so good in terms of a life lesson, particularly for companies who are doing big projects where there might be a lot of money involved and so on. Doing something like Everest, the attention to detail is absolutely off the scale. Yeah, because you're dealing with logistics, but you're also dealing with life as well. So,
it's literally life and death.
Yeah, yes, really. If you look at it, it's most extreme, but also there's all those, like any project, there's the finance to think about, there's the feeding people to think about, there's all the equipment to think about. For example, on Everest, we laid 5 miles of rope in place. But I think, what I find when I talk to companies is that a lot of what they're doing, it is about Excel spreadsheets, it is about attention to detail, it is about, working hard together to bring a detailed plan into a successful outcome.
But it feels as though, taking a lesson from climbing a mountain, if we were to live life like that a little bit more, that, it's such a great idea, the preparation into life. Most people know to kind of maybe take care of themselves, eat healthy, look after, all of the things that we don't necessarily do because we're not really climbing the mountain. It's just getting through sort of each day. Whereas if it was looked at as more of an adventure, we would potentially live it slightly differently. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think, I suppose what's in your mind when you go to climb a big mountain is that if we do all this work now, it's going to be a much more enjoyable and rewarding experience. And I suppose if you thought about life like that, that if we do all these things right, life is going to be a much more rewarding and enjoyable experience. It'd be a real motivator to do those things, wouldn't it? So
often we find... there's a book that someone was telling me about, and it was an artist who is living their life and enjoying art, and then had a nightmare about living this sort of almost average life of, having sort of a set amount of kids and going to a job every day being the same. Mm-hmm. And it's quite interesting that actually if it was, you've got the average kind of life, and then if, like you say, if you look at it as this adventure, how differently would you look at life if life was going to be more of an adventure and not just the same each and every day?
Yeah, I mean sorry. No. Well, I suppose the great thing about mountains is none of them are the same. Every single mountain is different, and so you're not going to get bored, and you are. I think normal life today with the internet and all that we have, life has become pretty predictable.
Yeah.
Whereas on a mountain, every corner you turn, everything that's around you is so unpredictable.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And do you think that you've taken some of that into life?
Yes, in the way that I think, like we were saying earlier, I think I do see life slightly differently now, having a family, and you need things to probably be a little bit more stable for them and a little bit more predictable. But we try to take little moments of stepping outside of that to be creative, or get out in the mountains, go walk, go mountain biking, and have that a little bit more unpredictability.
I think children need that. I think people need something that's unpredictable to grow that understanding and how to deal with things. Because it seems like you've got this ability to be able to deal with things maybe slightly better than the average person, not average, you know what I mean? Everyday people, because you've experienced that challenge, that growth, that you've climbed the mountain, literally climbed the mountain, whereas people don't have those challenges and don't necessarily build that resilience, and life can seem quite difficult for those people. Do you see what I mean?
I mean, it's funny, sometimes I think it is, for me, if I'm in the outdoors on a mountain, and in those sorts of areas that I love being and I'm experienced at being at, I can be very resilient in those areas. But you stick me in an office for months on end with Excel spreadsheets and that type of thing that's very alien to me. My resilience isn't so good, maybe. So it's very situation-based as to how resilient you are.
Do you not think, though, that people sometimes have, like, not necessarily a calling, but there's something of certain people, like maybe your DNA somehow had that adventure in it because it came through from your family of them all doing these things. It's sort of certain things are traveled through to you, and it's like you need adventure. You need to go and do that. Maybe, I don't know, I can't answer for you, but putting you in a different environment, like data input, for example, it would be so different to actually who you are, maybe as a person.
I don't know what that is, but I think I am an adventurous person. When I look at my mum, she's unbelievable, 86 years old, and she's so driven and motivated to keep active and keep engaging with friends and doing exciting things and that sort of stuff. And I think my granddad, who I mentioned earlier, was in the war. He was like that, a real adventurous spirit. So I think, it probably is in my DNA a bit. And
or even just rubbed off,
I think it rubs off. It's, I think it is certainly part of me. And I look at my kids now, that they get bored very easily, but you put them on a mountain bike or get them in the outdoors with a dog, they love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably...
And it's like, to find fulfillment and a happier life, sometimes maybe we need to look at like what those things are to us and like go, like do that and make sure that, like for yourself, just making sure that life isn't just going to be data input, that you need to make sure that you take that time out to have that next adventure.
Yeah. I have found sometimes that being fairly resilient as a flip side to it as well, in that you keep going with stuff, to a point of keeping going and keeping going. And you get to a point where you might get reminded by your partner or your family that actually you shouldn't be doing like this. Is getting a bit miserable, a bit grim. You're dealing with stuff for too long. So there is that downside to that. There's also a flip side to things.
You need a balance.
You need a balance,
everything
absolutely.
Needs a balance. But I do think it's like having almost, like I've been reading about Ikigai, I think it's how
read a bit about it.
And just having that meaning. Do you know what I mean? So your meaning is your own meaning. I find that really wonderful that we've all got our own something, that makes us lose track of time and enjoy that moment. And no matter whether it's part of your life, as in your job, or that you need to have that as part of your life somehow, just to keep your happiness. And maybe there is downsides to it, but
I mean, whenever I think about happiness and fulfillment and all these different things, I just immediately think of the outdoors.
Yeah.
It just, I think of, the sun shining and the scenery and the exercise. It just always outdoors. I don't think of anything else. And, I have had the odd moment. I remember a few years ago working up in Headingley at the university, and I'd just done a lot of office time.
Yeah.
And just on the way home, I thought I'm going to take a bit of a diversion to the nearby wood. And I almost find myself walking along, like touching the trees and rubbing the leaves and, and just enjoying the sunshine. It was that real core sort of feeling. I needed to have an hour in the outdoors.
I feel like it's like modern life can be very disjointed from what I genuinely believe is our like natural kind of way. Yeah. Like I'd never really, and I think nature for me has been something like, it's just so wonderful. Like whether it be walking in the woods or even like going down to the sea, there's something that replenishes the soul that I wish everyone could experience. Like I don't know if it is like everyone's thing. I hope that it is, and I'm sure it is. I feel like it's like our true nature to be not sat in concrete buildings all day. It just feels more
agree,
right. You know what I mean?
And there's lots of research I think been done to say that we do need that connection with nature, and I find it sad sometimes when I go out as an outdoor instructor and there are people in my group, and this happened to me only last week, that people are saying, just don't like nature. And I feel sorry for them, in the way that they've probably not been brought up and introduced to nature in the right way, that they're not having that same experience. And I find that quite sad, because I think nature's good for everybody.
Yeah, it definitely feeds the soul. I think so. And I think like for someone like that, it's just reminding them to think about how they felt as they arrived that day, and then at the end of that day, just take a moment and just really ask yourself, how does it feel now? Like having climbed, like if you've done abseiling with them, or if they've been somewhere, just because sometimes they do, like, it's almost like you can live through filters and you don't realize that it's like, oh, well, I don't like nature. Yeah, but you've never really tried it. You've never really been in nature. Yeah. So once you then have been given that opportunity, you kind of have to re-question yourself and say, like...
I agree. I think you're absolutely right there, that people, like the young people, a couple of young people last week who said they don't like nature, I think it's almost become just a recording from that's what they say. Yeah. And, for me, there's nothing more rewarding. When you take a group in the outdoors, the people like the outdoors who do physical exercise and so on, that they're easy to give a good day. Yeah. But the most rewarding is when you get somebody who comes out at the beginning of the day and says, I don't like the outdoors. And at the end of the day or the end of the week, they're saying, oh it's amazing. When you've converted people, it's an amazing feeling. Yeah.
It's like that freedom that you're trying to give them. Like it's almost like, I don't know. I find like people who don't necessarily connect like that are far too much in their head, and it is phones. It is constantly like this doom scrolling kind of effect of like even just how they're looking. That like if you're climbing with long nails and things, I'm sure it's difficult. But it kind of takes us away from who we can really be, And I think nature and getting outdoors, I think especially if you're feeling like low or in a difficult place in yourself, there's like a freedom to it. And like, touching the trees or whatever, it's like there's an energy to it. There's there actually is. Scientifically,
and as we said, the scenery. Yeah. And, I think the big views, obviously it's always a little bit easier in good weather. Yeah. But, just there's definitely an energy to it. And, it's just a go-to place for me, for sure, when I'm not feeling great or need a bit of a break, just that movement and getting out there. I think that'll have a massive impact on people, like just listening to that and hoping that they'll, it can even just be go for a walk and move. If you're having a really difficult day, just get outside. Even if you can just sit in the garden, if you can't physically go for a walk or get somewhere, but try to just go for a walk. It's going to You can keep it. I think you can keep it super simple. And there is a guy who wrote a book about micro adventures. So you don't need to be climbing Everest or climbing any mountain for that matter. But he took the tiniest adventures. And he lived in London as well. So, and he wrote this particular book about the adventures that could be had around a city.
Oh, really? That sounds great.
I think one of his ventures one day was swimming along a river and seeing life from river level.
Yeah.
And camping on the side of the river just on his own, and just very simple experience. But even that, going out with a dog for an hour, or just taking those little moments to go and sit in the park, that they are powerful.
I hope that this moves people to do that as well, and really makes them think it is possible to even just small things like that. I think it's just so important. I really, really do. To get outside of the norm. Yeah. Whether 100%. It be even sport or nature or whichever, I think it'll genuinely really help. To focus on a goal for yourself, how do you go about focusing, starting? What's the thought to go on to do something? What if you were going to set a goal now, what might you do first?
I would, if I was setting a goal for myself now, I think only a couple of days ago, my closest friend called me the list man. I'm quite big into putting things down on paper. Yeah. And so it might be a list, it might be a spider diagram, that sort of stuff. And I think it just helps me see it clearer. Yeah. And I remember a really good friend of mine saying, this is 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and I worked with him. He said whenever he gets a challenge, he'll put the benefits and the downsides on a piece of paper very clearly in front of him so he can see them. Yeah. So I think, that certainly when I'm thinking about a goal, I'm very much put it down on paper to begin with so I can see it clearly what I'm thinking about doing. Then as I've already mentioned about having close friends and be able to bounce ideas off friends, I'll start to probably talk to people about what I'm going to do. So that's probably how I kick things off.
If you're enjoying the Jolly Soul podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode and you'll help us continue sharing incredible stories with more inspiring guests. If you know someone who would benefit from a conversation, please share it with them too. Your support means so much to us and we are so grateful to have you here on this journey. So I noticed that when you were doing your presentations that you finished with a quote, which obviously, Jolly Soul, there's lots of quotes on our Instagram and social media. The quote, I have got it written down here. I'm not sure if you know the one that you use.
Unless you try something beyond what you've already mastered, you'll never grow.
Yes. Why have you chosen that quote?
I mean, I think it comes back a little bit to that sort of volunteering for everything and that, the fact that unless you put yourself into a new situation, a new environment, a new challenge, it's hard to keep developing. And so I think it's really, that is a quote that I've read many quotes in my time. I used to have a quote book about climbing quotes, but that one really stuck with me. Yeah. I think, just put it, learn a little bit each time, each adventure is the way to go on.
And do you use that? Do you always use that yourself in that particular quote? Yeah. I think it's so impactful, isn't it? That you can have something that's just a couple of lines of, a few words, and it just has such an impact on you. It's really beautiful. I've always had quotes all over the house, and it just picks me up and just helps me in different ways.
Yeah. In the outdoor world, we often use that comfort, stretch, panic model.
All right.
Which is sort of ties in with that, really, doesn't it? That if you stay in your comfort zone all the time, you're not going to learn much. You're not going to move forward. But if you stretch yourself a little bit, that's the zone that you are going to develop more, and and have those adventures and get more out of life, without going too far into the panic zone, though.
Yeah,
but, in that stretch zone is a really important part of the outdoors to take yourself forward.
And I think that brings you into life. There's often in life people just don't tend to stretch. It's so easy to just life becomes sort of mundane and just the same. I'm always doing something different as much as I can. I was up at sort of 5 o'clock this morning reading, and then out on the bike in the darkness, which is just, I see so many people, all the lights are out, and I'm like, wow, I've done so much this morning. Like
No.
I've just had that like mini adventure of my own, you
Yeah.
know, a bit of meditation. And I honestly think like those little things like make life so much better. Like a challenge to get up at 5 a.m. even is a
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
the best. I don't always enjoy doing that, but what I get from that whole little hour of adventure of being on the bike and reading or just growing in some way,
Yeah.
it massively helps life.
100%. I think we were saying earlier about screens and seeing kids on screens. If I'm honest, it breaks my heart when I see the kids on screens.
Yeah.
Thankfully, my kids, sometimes after a bit of force, will
Yeah.
put the phones down. But, you know, when I see them then in the outdoors and how much they actually really love that, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes dragging them to get on a walk is difficult to begin with. But when they get out there, I love seeing that. But screens, when I see them talking on the news about bans on phones in schools, I'm all for that. Because getting kids in the outdoors is, even though they may not think so to begin with, it never fails to be a good experience. But I think one of the big things for me as an outdoor instructor, it does break my heart a bit when I hear of people having bad outdoor experiences. They've maybe been pushed too hard or walked too fast or, you know, done something a bit too much for them. Our job as outdoor instructors is to give people a progressive experience in the outdoors. And I think, you know, that's really important to me. I often get very diverse groups.
Yeah.
You know, and you've got to give an experience to everybody so they're all going to enjoy it. And, you know, that's so important. You know, success for me is at the end of the day, people have had a good experience and want to do it again.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think like if for those listening, just do, even if it's just one thing in 6 months, just set a challenge of yourself to just go and attempt something.
Yeah.
I'm going to try the 3 peaks. I think that's the next challenge I'm going to try. I might need some advice, but anyway.
I did that 2 weeks ago. It's great.
I love it. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So we're going to finish now with, as we do with all of the podcasts, where we finish with 3 big questions. Now, these questions are just questions. I don't expect you to know the answer. If you do, brilliant. And, you know, just in a nutshell, it could be one word that comes to mind. So don't worry about these really big questions.
I'm scared now.
So, okay, we'll hit with the first one. So what do you think the key to success is?
It's interesting because I'm looking at a quote on your wall as well. It is the word kindness. I think that is really key to setting a nice environment where people want to be.
Yeah. And
where things come back at you as well if you're kind to people. So I think that one word is key to success. Excellent.
What do you think the secret to happiness is?
Secret to happiness. The outdoors.
Yes. Great answer. Try it if you haven't at home. And finally, the biggest of them all, what do you think the meaning of life is?
Oh, that is a more difficult question to answer. I'm not sure what to say for that one. I think...
Think about anything that, you know, where you found maybe the most joy even. That can be something that helps with that answer sometimes.
Again, I find myself, whenever I'm talking about happiness or meaning, it does make me think of the outdoors and you know, what that can bring to you. And I think getting out into the outdoors is super important we need to do it.
Yeah.
And it brings back so much for you as an individual if you do that.
It's like the adventures of life.
Yeah.
It's brings a lot to it. And finally, we're gonna, as we know, the quotes can change so many things and can often be brilliant. So in here is a quote. I'd like you to, for the last moment, if you don't mind picking one out and then just reading it for us. And that's your quote that you get to keep.
No, I'm going to have to just push that away.
Yeah, no.
I did leave my glasses in there.
I know. They're very faint.
I'm focused in now. Learn to take a leap of Oh, I'm struggling to read that.
Here, let
bit,
me read it for you. I'm so sorry that they are very.
Learn to take a leap of faith. Yes, you may fall a little, but you. I can't read it all. Sorry, I'm really sorry on that.
Fine, okay. Learn to take a leap of faith. Yes, you may fall a little, but you might just land exactly where you're supposed to be.
That's great.
How bizarre that's yours. Don't fall on the mountain.
Yeah,
that's
a
all
great
these mountain talks and falling. That is quite interesting that you chose.
That's a bit like volunteer for everything. We're talking, sort of similar in a way.
Yeah.
To take, taking opportunities.
Well, thank you so much for today. It's been so insightful. I've really, really loved our conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.